Good morning, all of you. It's Dr. Abdul Latif from the Department of English, Kondoti Government Arts and Science College, Vilayil. Let me invite all of you to the platform Angloscape. I would be uploading my video lectures on this platform for my students primarily and also for students of English language and literature all over the world. And the lessons that I would like to focus on will be from the syllabus of Calcutta University, especially MA English syllabus and BA English syllabus. And for lesson one, we have taken Funeral Blues. It's a poem by W H Auden. And W H Auden, as you know, is a well known 20th century poet. As a writer, Auden has focused on a number of themes. When you look at his period, from 1907 to 1973, we can understand that it was a period of two world wars. So, naturally, as a poet, he was highly influenced by the political unrest of the time. An important theme in his writing is the political unrest of the time and its impact on the people who were living at that time. In another sense, how the disturbed political scenario of his time had its own destructive impact on the people. The psychological effect of war, fighting, dictatorial ruling, dictatorial rulers on people of his time. This is an important area that Auden as a writer focused on. And from another angle, he tries to look at war, the sociological, psychological, political impacts of war, and how wars create sufferings for mankind, and how it creates long lasting social issues. So, these also form a part of his writing. And when we look into some other poems, we can see that the poet tries to juxtapose glorious past with the unrest of the contemporary society, or past versus the present. Contrast is sometimes very strongly seen in his writings, especially in a poem like The Shield of Achilles. The hostility and resentment towards war. As a writer, he was so much affected and psychologically wounded by the ills that was created for the common people in society. And he voiced a strong sense of hatred and disagreement with war. And this is also seen in his writings. And most of the poems that he wrote before the First World War shows this anguish. And the poems that he wrote after World War II, because the wars created a lot of unrest in society. They also changed people's strong faith in religion, and science was getting stronger into the hearts of people. And as a result, the lack of spirituality, then the development of consumerism, and how people were reduced into a kind of alphanumeric existence. So these themes started getting predominant in his writings in the post-World War period. And it's important to look at some of the poems that we should read when we try to understand Auden's poetry. And of those poems, one could be in memory of W. Yeats. And written in 1940, the poem tries to commemorate the death of W. W. Yeats, the poetic contribution of Yeats, and because Yeats was a great influence on Auden. And it's a tribute, the poem is a kind of tribute that he pays to his mentor. Another poem, September 1, 1939, is about war in one sense, because it was occasioned by Nazi Germany's invasion of Poland, which later resulted in the World War First. So the poet's orientation with war and also its destructive impact on people, all these things are somehow discussed in this poem, September 1, 1939. And in Shield of Achilles is another poem which often gets anthologized in collections from W H Auden. And here it is written from a mythological background where the Greek mythological hero Achilles lost his shield, and later his mother gets another shield done by a goddess. As the goddess was working on the shield, Achilles' mother looks into the shield and he's bewildered to see what the goddess has created on the shield, the paintings, especially because she expected something very pleasant, something quite calm, something quite welcome. But instead of that, the paintings and images engraved on the shield were really terrifying. And through this, the poet tries to juxtapose the glory of the past and the misery of the contemporary society. Then the unknown citizen is another poem that that's very important to understand W. H. Auden as a writer, and one of the important thematic orientations in his writings, where an ordinary citizen who is subject to a dictatorial rulership, how he gets reduced his individuality into numbers, and how the establishments and governments try to enslave their citizens by reducing them into certain alphanumeric representations. And this is what he tries to show in The Unknown Citizen. And coming to the poem, The Funeral Blues, which is included in the Calicut University second semester MA syllabus. It's a very short poem, not so much representative of W. H. Auden's writing, but it's a song taken from one of the plays he co-authored with Christopher Isherwood called The Ascent of F6. It's a dirge. You know, a dirge is a very short poem of lament, especially meant to be sung. And dirge is different from an elegy because an elegy is written following certain conventions and norms. And the poem Funeral Blues focuses on the themes of dependence, death, and grief because we have the poet lamenting the death of somebody who was very close to him and how his death left a very destructive, lasting, grief stricken impact on not only himself but the surroundings that he was in. And this is what funeral blues shows. And it's important to know that because in the poem it is not very much confirmed, but there are critics who associate and identify the person mentioned in funeral blues or the he mentioned in funeral blues with Stephen Spencer and Christopher Isherwood, with whom Auden had a gay relationship. And the poem was there in the play The Ascent of F6, and in that, one of the characters, Michael Ransom, is trying to climb F6, a Himalaya mountain, to please his mother. But in the course of climbing, he dies. After his death, his brother, James Ransom, it's a poem which Michael Ransom's brother's death, after his brother's death, James Ransom uh, uh, utters this, or it's a dirge sung over the death of James Ransom, Michael Ransom's brother. And this is the context of the poem in the play. Now, look at the poem, Funeral Blues. If you look at the first stanza, the poem starts abruptly without much introduction, but there's a mystery surrounding uh, the poem. Stop all the clocks and cut off the telephone. Prevent the dog from barking with a juicy bone. Silence the pianos with muffled drum. Bring out the coffin. Let the mourners come. Uh, the first stanza tries to show the sudden shock that the death of the person has created on the poet. He wants the environment around him to stop and be still, or the news of the death of the person seems to have affected him so much that he feels quite uncomfortable in living in the surrounding he's in, or he wants the whole world and the immediate surrounding around him to stop still and participate in his gloom. And this is what the first stanza tries to convey. Stop all the clocks, cut off the telephone, prevent the dog from barking with a juicy bone. So he does not want the life to continue as it was or as it is. He wants life to stop and be part of the grief that he's in. And this is why he tries to address Cloak, and he says, let the telephone be stopped, and uh, let the dog stop barking, or don't allow it to bark, and let the pianos be silenced. With muffled drum, bring out the coffin, let the mourners come. So what? So we have a normal state of affair which the poet was in, which he wants to be still, because what comes in is something quiet, unpleasant. And as we move on to the next stanza, let aeroplane circle morning overhead, scribbling on the sky the message he's dead. Put creepy boss around the white snakes of the public doors. Let the traffic policemen wear black cotton gloves. So the theme of the grief that the news of the death of the person brought to the poet, he wants that grief to be shared and reflected in everything around him. The grief, the bereavement that the death of the person left wants to be announced louder. And so he wants the this sad news to be announced, not only in the immediate surrounding that he's in, but in the wider space. Or in another sense, he wants the sky to be also participating in his grief. Let aeroplanes circle mourning overhead, scribbling on the sky the message he's dead. So let aeroplanes be roaming around in the sky to say that somebody who was very close to me is dead. And in another sense, the poet wants the space, the atmosphere, the sky to be part of the grief that he is pushed to. Put creepy boss round the white necks of the public doors, and let the traffic policemen wear black cotton gloves. And the poem uses a lot of images. Let everybody wear some kind of black symbol to show that he or she or it is mourning along with the poet the death of the person very close to him. And that's what the second stanza focuses on. And as we move on to the third stanza, we have this theme of loss, theme of grief, agony, deep rooted in his mind, and how much dependent he was on him. So he was my north, my south, my east and west, my working week and my Sunday rest, my noon, my midnight, my talk, my song. I thought that love would last forever. I was wrong. So he was to me everything. In another sense, I understood the world through him, or he was a mirror for me on which the world was reflected, through which I had a glimpse to the world. This is both the north, south, east, and west. He was with me at the time of my work. He was with me when I was free. My noon, my midnight, my talk, my song. So it shows the kind of dependence that the poet had on him, the kind of love he possessed for him, and it was so strong that the poet never realized till the news of his death that it will be cut off. My dependence on him will have a stop, or my love for him will come to an end. And now there's a sudden realization that it was wrong. So, indirectly, the poem, while dealing with the theme of dependence, love, indirectly suggests too much dependence on somebody is dangerous. The stars are not wanted now. Put out everyone. Pack up the moon and dismantle the sun. Pour away the ocean, sweep up the wood. For nothing now can ever come to any good. So, in the earlier two stanzas, the poet wanted the entire surroundings to participate in his grief. And as he comes to the third stanza, the poet tries to recall how affectionate and loving he was, or what is the intensity of love he had for him, and what was the kind of dependence that he had on him. But a sudden realization that everything is gone. The guy is dead. So that realization further brings a kind of disillusion within the poet. And this is what gets reflected in the last stanza. The stars are not wanted now. Put out everyone. Pack up the moon and dismantle the sun. Let the entire universe be destroyed. Or, in another sense, uh, 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 a grave realization that the target of my love and the target of my dependence, the target of my realization is dead, creates a kind of senselessness within him, and he wants to reject the whole world. Or he does not want the world to move on. The stars are not wanted now. Put out everyone, pack up the moon and dismantle the sun, power away the ocean and sweep up the wood. For nothing now can ever come to any good. So his strong sense of loss makes him reject the world, or in another sense, when you are so much grief stricken, you lose sense of living or life, the whole life with the wonderful things around you appears to be quite senseless, quite meaningless. And it's because of the inner grief. Too much grief sometimes leads a person to um, kill oneself. You kill oneself when you come to a state where you think the entire life is meaningless, or the very existence has lost its sense. So this is what we understand from the last stanza. So to look at the poem again, in the first stanza, the poet wants the smooth course of life be stopped because mourners have to get in with the dead body of the person whom he loved, on whom he depended a lot. Then in the second stanza, he wants the entire world to take part in his agony and grief. Then, in the fourth stanza, third stanza, he tries to recall how dear the person was to him, how much dependent he was on him, and how much the loss matters to him. And a sudden realization that what I thought would last forever lasted. And this sudden realization creates a sense of utter senselessness within him. So he looks around, and the wonderful creations within the world to him at that particular moment appear to be quite senseless. So there's an absolute state of nothingness within him. So he wants the entire world to stop and get destroyed. When we look back to the poem from a very close critical angle, we can see that the poem makes use of a host of images. Instead of stating an intense emotion that the poet felt, he uses a number of references, rather, a number of images, and all these images try to reflect his inner feelings. And this is the technique Auden employs in the poem. And this can be cited as a best example how T.S. Eliot's term objective correlative works in writing. The intense grief that the poet feels is not stated anywhere, rather, by using a host of images, by putting images one after another, by correlating, by relating his feelings into images, the poet articulates his strong feelings. And this is what T.S. Eliot spoke about when he introduced the concept objective correlative. And the poem can be looked upon from a psychological angle in the sense that whenever we have a strong feeling within us, we try to see objects around us from that perspective, or our inner feelings are projected into the objects outside. And traces of this can also be seen in the poem. And a subtle warning is also there. Apart from expressing a strong bond and bonding with someone and losing the relationship with his death, which the poet never dreamt of, there's a subtle warning that uh, absolute dependence on someone will change or will create an absolute chasm of disappointment within you once the person goes away from you or dies. And there's a strong warning about murderous kind of optimism that uh, something you have or someone who is very dear and near and close to you will never die or will be lost. So all these subtle suggestions and techniques are being used, even though it's a very short poem. And as an afterthought or as an afterword, I would like to add these things as well. And this is all about Funeral Blues, a poem from W H Auden. Thank you uh, for listening to me.